Rick Hansen was born in 1957 in Port Alberni, a small town on Vancouver Island, Canada. From the very beginning, he loved the outdoors. Fishing, camping, and above all, sports filled his childhood. By his teenage years, Rick was already showing signs of being an exceptional athlete. He dreamed of one day becoming a professional sportsman, maybe even representing Canada on the world stage. But in 1973, when Rick was just 15 years old, his life took a sudden, devastating turn. He and a friend were returning from a fishing trip in the back of a pickup truck. The vehicle swerved off the road and crashed. Rick was thrown from the truck. When he opened his eyes, he couldn't feel his legs. The accident had left him paralyzed from the waist down. At first, the shock was unbearable. He lay in the hospital, staring at the ceiling, wondering if his life was over before it had truly begun. Doctors told him bluntly, he would never walk again. His dreams of becoming a star athlete seemed crushed forever. For a time, Rick struggled with despair. How could he, a boy who had defined himself by movement, now live in a body that refused to cooperate? He wanted to quit, to give up. But then something inside him shifted. He realized that while he had lost the use of his legs, he hadn't lost his determination, his willpower, or his love for life. With the support of his family and friends, Rick began rehabilitation. He learned how to use a wheelchair not just as a necessity, but as a tool to regain his independence. Every push of the wheels became a reminder that he still had strength, that he still had control over his future. Slowly, he began to rebuild his identity not as a boy who had lost everything, but as a young man who had the chance to prove that life with a disability could still be full, active, and meaningful. Before long, Rick returned to sports, but this time, in a wheelchair. He discovered wheelchair basketball and wheelchair racing. His competitive spirit ignited once again. Soon, he was not only participating but dominating, winning national championships and proving to himself and to others that disability did not mean inability. Rick Hansen's accident could have ended his story. Instead, it became the beginning of a new one that would inspire millions. He had lost the use of his legs, but he had found a mission: to show the world that barriers exist only if we let them. After his accident, Rick Hansen's fire for competition didn't fade, it only grew stronger. Once he adapted to life in a wheelchair, he turned his focus toward sports. Wheelchair basketball, volleyball, and racing became his new fields of battle. What began as therapy quickly became a passion. Rick wasn't satisfied with just participating. He trained harder than anyone else, pushing his body to its limits. His arms became his legs, his wheels became his wings. By his early 20s, he was representing Canada in international competitions. He won multiple national championships in wheelchair racing and earned medals at the Pan Am Games. In 1982, he even took home 6 medals at the Pan American Wheelchair Games in Halifax, proving he was one of the best athletes in the world. But for Rick, the victories weren't just about personal glory. Every medal was a chance to challenge perceptions, to show the world that people with disabilities weren't limited by their wheelchairs, they were capable of greatness. During this time, Rick was deeply inspired by his friend and mentor, Terry Fox. Rick and Terry had met in high school, both passionate athletes with big dreams. When Terry lost his leg to cancer and embarked on the Marathon of Hope, Rick watched in awe. He saw how one young man's courage could move an entire nation. Terry's run ended too soon, but his legacy lived on in Rick's heart. Rick began to wonder, how could he continue that spirit of determination and hope? How could he break down the barriers faced by people with disabilities, not just in Canada but across the world? The answer came in the form of a dream, a tour that would circle the globe, powered only by the wheels of his chair and the strength of his arms. Rick wanted to travel across continents, through cities and countryside, showing the world what a person with a disability could achieve. And just like Terry, he wanted to raise money not for cancer this time, but for spinal cord injury research and accessibility projects. In 1985, at the age of 27, Rick Hansen launched the Man in Motion World Tour. His mission: to wheel more than 40,000 kilometers across 34 countries in over 2 years. His goal: to raise awareness and millions of dollars for spinal cord research. As he set off from Vancouver, many doubted him. Could one man really circle the world in a wheelchair? Wasn't it too dangerous, too exhausting, too ambitious? But Rick's determination was unshakable. With every push of his wheels, he carried not just his own dream, but the dreams of millions who faced barriers every day. The Man in Motion World Tour had begun, and Rick Hansen was ready to prove that no obstacle was too great for the human spirit. When Rick Hansen began the Man in Motion World Tour in March 1985, the odds were stacked against him. The route was grueling: 40,000 kilometers across 4 continents, through blistering heat, freezing winds, and endless miles of road. But Rick had prepared himself mentally and physically. His arms would replace his legs, his willpower would replace doubt. The early days were tough. In the US, drivers sometimes shouted insults, mocking a man in a wheelchair on the highway. In Europe, he battled steep hills, harsh weather, and exhaustion. In Asia and Australia, he faced unfamiliar cultures and dangerous conditions. At times, his hands blistered and bled from pushing his wheels day after day. There were moments of loneliness, frustration, and even despair. But Rick never stopped. His mantra was simple: one more push. Slowly, the world began to notice. Newspapers covered his journey, and television cameras followed his progress. Crowds started gathering along the roadsides to cheer him on. Children in wheelchairs came to meet him, inspired by the sight of someone who looked like them achieving the impossible. Rick wasn't just wheeling across countries, he was changing hearts and minds. By the time he returned to Canada in 1987, Rick Hansen had wheeled through 34 countries and covered more than 40,000 kilometers in just over 2 years. The tour raised $26 million for spinal cord research and initiatives to make communities more accessible. But more importantly, it raised awareness worldwide about the potential of people with disabilities. Rick's arrival home in Vancouver was unforgettable. Tens of thousands lined the streets, waving flags and cheering as he wheeled the final stretch. Canada celebrated him not just as an athlete, but as a national hero, someone who had turned tragedy into triumph, and personal struggle into global change. In the years since, Rick Hansen has continued to dedicate his life to advocacy. Through the Rick Hansen Foundation, he has worked to make schools, workplaces, and communities more accessible. His dream is a world without barriers, where disability doesn't define ability, and everyone has the chance to live fully. Rick often says, "There is more potential in each of us than we realize, and together, there is no limit to what we can achieve." His story proves that strength is not measured by the body, but by the spirit that refuses to give up. From a devastating accident at 15 to circling the globe in a wheelchair, Rick Hansen showed the world that motion is not just about walking, it's about moving hearts, moving minds, and moving society forward. His wheels carried him around the world, but his message continues to carry us all. There are no limits, only possibilities. Rick Hansen's homecoming in 1987 was more than a personal victory, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Canada welcomed him with open arms, but Rick knew his mission wasn't complete. The Man in Motion World Tour had raised awareness and millions of dollars, but for real change to happen, society needed to build opportunities for people with disabilities every single day. He founded the Rick Hansen Foundation, an organization dedicated to breaking down barriers and funding spinal cord research. Through the foundation, Rick pushed for a world where accessibility wasn't an afterthought, but a standard. Schools, workplaces, and public spaces became part of his vision, places where ramps, elevators, and inclusive design would give everyone equal chances. Rick didn't stop at advocacy, he became a voice of hope. He visited hospitals, spoke to young athletes, and encouraged people who had faced life-changing injuries to believe in their potential. He reminded them that a wheelchair was not a prison, but a tool, a way to keep moving forward. In time, Rick's influence stretched far beyond Canada. Governments, researchers, and international organizations sought his advice. His foundation launched initiatives like the Accessibility Certification Program, which helps communities identify and remove barriers in buildings. He also supported groundbreaking research in spinal cord injury, believing one day science could offer new treatments and perhaps even a cure. But Rick's legacy is not only measured in programs or research. It lives in the countless people whose lives he touched. The child in a wheelchair who no longer felt invisible, the young athlete who found courage to keep training, the community that built ramps so no one would be left behind, all of them are part of his ripple effect. Even decades after his tour, Rick Hansen continues to inspire. He says, "When you take on challenges and believe in a dream, the impossible becomes possible." His story is proof that determination can change not only a life, but the world. Rick Hansen began as a boy who loved sports, faced tragedy at 15, and turned it into a mission that circled the globe. But his greatest journey has been showing us that true motion is not measured in kilometers, it is measured in how far we can carry one another forward. His wheels may have stopped rolling across highways, but his message continues to roll through generations. A world without barriers is a world where everyone belongs. Rick Hansen's story did not end with the world tour, nor with the establishment of his foundation. His greatest legacy is how he has kept the spirit of the man in motion alive, adapting it for new generations. Over the years, Rick has returned to schools across Canada to speak with children. He often tells them that each person has a responsibility to create a more inclusive world. His words spark young minds, planting seeds of compassion and resilience. For Rick, the real measure of success is not medals or money, it is the kindness and determination that ripple outward from one person to another. One of his proudest initiatives is the Rick Hansen School Program, which educates students about inclusion, accessibility, and the power of empathy. Through storytelling and activities, young people learn that everyone has value and that difference is not a weakness but a strength. Thousands of classrooms have embraced this program, ensuring that the next generation grows up with awareness and respect. Rick has also continued his role as a global ambassador. He has worked with world leaders, scientists, and disability rights activists to share knowledge and push for change. Whether it's advocating for accessible sports programs or supporting life-changing research, Rick's presence reminds people that obstacles can always be transformed into opportunities. Despite his achievements, Rick remains humble. He often reflects on the accident that changed his life at 15 and says that while he would never have chosen it, it gave him a mission greater than himself. He believes that everyone has a man in motion inside them, a dream, a cause, or a purpose that can inspire action and impact others. Rick Hansen's journey proves that even when life alters our path, we can still move forward with courage and vision. His wheels carried him across continents, but his heart carries a dream that belongs to us all, a future without barriers. His motion continues not only in his own work, but in the lives of all who take up his challenge to keep pushing, keep believing, and keep moving the world toward hope. Right. Part 6. Inspiring Generations. As years passed, Rick Hansen's influence stretched far beyond his athletic triumphs. His Man in Motion World Tour had ended, but its legacy was only beginning. The funds raised planted seeds for spinal cord research, accessibility projects, and inclusive communities. Yet Rick knew that real change was about more than money, it was about shifting mindsets. He became a tireless advocate, traveling across Canada and the world, speaking in schools, universities, and conferences. In every audience, young people listened to a man who had once been told his future was limited, only to watch him prove that limits could be broken. His story showed them that resilience and hope could turn pain into purpose. Through the Rick Hansen Foundation, he launched initiatives like the Accessible Canada program, aiming to remove physical and social barriers. His team worked with architects, businesses, and governments to design spaces where everyone could belong. His vision was simple but powerful, a world where accessibility is the norm, not the exception. Rick's commitment extended into education and mentorship. He often told young athletes with disabilities, "Your wheelchair is not a barrier, it's a vehicle to possibilities." That perspective empowered a generation of para-athletes to dream bigger, push harder, and represent their countries on global stages. Even decades after his world tour, Rick Hansen's message continues to ripple through time. Courage creates change, and passion fuels progress. His life became a reminder that true heroes don't just chase their own dreams, they ignite dreams in others. Rick Hansen's determination and vision did not go unnoticed. Over the years, he received some of Canada's highest honors, including being named a Companion of the Order of Canada and being inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame. These awards were not simply for his athletic achievements, but for the way he used his platform to transform how society viewed disability. He carried the Olympic torch several times, each moment symbolizing not only athletic pride but also the endurance of the human spirit. When he wheeled with the flame, crowds erupted not just for the games, but for what Rick represented: perseverance, unity, and hope. Recognition also came from beyond Canada. World leaders, researchers, and communities honored his contributions to accessibility and spinal cord research. Yet Rick always deflected praise, insisting that the spotlight should shine on the cause, not himself. His humility became part of his power. But perhaps his greatest recognition came in quieter moments, when parents thanked him for giving their child confidence, when young athletes said his story pushed them to keep going, or when a person in a wheelchair entered a building without barriers for the first time. Rick Hansen's journey began with tragedy on a highway when he was just 15. But what followed was a life that redefined resilience. Every medal, every honor, and every cheer was a reminder that his true achievement was proving to the world that limits exist only in the mind. Rick Hansen often says that his Man in Motion World Tour was never about the end of a journey, but the beginning of one. Even after circling the globe and raising millions, he reminded people that there is no true finish line when it comes to equality, accessibility, and human potential. In his later years, Rick focused on ensuring that the next generation would carry the torch. Through his foundation, he invested in youth leadership programs, empowering students to create inclusive schools and communities. He believed that change is not built by one hero, but by countless everyday acts of courage and kindness. Rick also shared his story through books, documentaries, and public talks. His voice carried the same conviction it did when he first pushed his wheelchair onto the road in 1985, that adversity can spark greatness, and that no dream is too big if fueled by determination. Even today, his wheels continue to inspire movement, though not always across continents, but within hearts and societies. His impact can be seen in ramps built where there were once only stairs, in medical research that brings hope to people with spinal cord injuries, and in the mindset that disability is not limitation but possibility. Rick Hansen's life reminds us that the true measure of a journey is not distance, but difference. He showed the world that motion is more than physical, it is about moving humanity forward. And as long as his story is told, the motion will never stop.